A Human Rights Guide. Chapter 1. Human Rights Websites. Human Rights Websites 1. If you're traveling somewhere, you can check out the country's human rights track record. Amnesty.org, HRW.org, aclu.org/issues/cyber/hmcl.html, cyber liberties page. aclu.org, American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU. ado.dk, Art in Defense of Humanism. IUSA.org, Amnesty International United States. ala.org/alierg/oif/freeread.html, The Freedom to Read, Office for Intellectual Freedom un.org/overview/rights.html, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. amnesty-caribbean.org. amnesty.asso.fr, Amnesty International France. amnesty.de, Amnesty International Germany. amnesty.org/contacts/eng-index, Amnesty Organizations Worldwide. amnesty.org, Amnesty International. amnesty.org. amnesty.org.uk, Amnesty International Britain. apc.org/twn, Third World Network. yender.com/vanished, vanishedgalleryclark.net/kurd, Washington Kurdish Institute. acil.org, American Society of International Law. acil.org, American Society of International Law. acirt.org, Association for Safe International Road Travel. basicrights.org, Oregon. business-humanrights.org. calyx.com/refuse, refuse resist. foundation.reuters.com, the Reuter Foundation. Wiesenthal.com, Simon Wiesenthal Center. cchr.org, Citizens Commission on Human Rights. cchr.org.au, Citizens Commission on Human Rights Australia. ccprcenter.org, CCPR. Center for Civil and Political Rights. childer.ightsnet.org. chrc-ccdp.ca/discrimination/physical_mental-n.asp, Canadian Human Rights Commission. citizeninamerica.com. civicus.org, World Alliance for Citizen Participation. columbia.edu/slc11, Coalition Against Slavery in Mauritania and Sudan. cpj.org, Committee to Protect Journalists. crimedime.uniupo.it, Centro de Recerca Interdepartamental en Medicina de Emergencia y Dei Desastre ed Informatica Aplicada a la Didactica ed a la Pratica Medica, Crimedime. crin.org, CRIN. Child Rights Information Network. dds.nl/hivos, Hivos Humanistic Institute for Development Cooperation. Derechos.org, Human Rights. Derechos.org, Derechos Human Rights. Speakeasy.org/eoaim, Earth on the Air Independent Media. dfn.org, Digital Freedom Network, DFN, promotes the use of the Internet for human rights. dhr.go.cr, Defensoría de los Habitantes, Costa Rica. diana.law.yale.edu, Diana Project, Yale University Law School. aircweb.org, European Human Rights Center. eoc.org.hk, Equal Opportunities Commission, Hong Kong SAR, China. equalityhumanrights.com. escapeartist.com/freedom/monitor.htm, human. escr-net.org, escrnet. freedomhouse.org. freedomhouse.org, Freedom House. hdr.undp.org, Human Development Report by United Nations Development Programme. hhrjournal.org, Health and Human Rights, an international journal. hk.super.net/ahrchk, Asian Human Rights Commission. ho.se, Swedish Disability Ombudsman. house.gov/csce/1205.htm, religious liberty for minority faiths in Europe, political and legal organizations, political and legal organizations. hraic.org.au, human rights abuses in Islamic countries. hrcactioncenter.org. hrcr.org/s Africa, Bill of Rights comparative law materials. hrcusa.org, Human Rights Campaign. hrea.org/erc/links/index, Human Rights Education ASNs. hreoc.gov.au, Human Rights Australia. hri.ca, Human Rights Internet. hri.ca, Human Rights Internet. hrusa.org, Human Rights USA. hrw.org, Human Rights Watch. hrw.org. hrw.org, Human Rights Watch. hrweb.org, Human Rights. hrweb.org, Human Rights Web. humanrights.gov, humanrights.gov, news on human rights around the world. humanrights.org. humanrights.org, Human Rights Watch. humanrights.state.mn.us. humanrights.yukon.edu. humanrightsdoctorate.blogspot.com. humanrightseachday.com. humanrightsfirst.org. humanrightsfirst.org. communityrights.org/legal resources. rosabrooks.squarespace.com/law-in-the-heart-of-darkness. humanrightstorch.org. horisearch.org, search engine for locating human rights documents. iaetf.org, International Anti-Euthanasia Task Force. calyx.com/Mariola P, International Foundation on Drug Policy and Human Rights. icrc.org/n, the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC. igc.apc.org. initiativexs4all.nl/ccc, Clean Clothes Campaign. institut-fuer-menschenrechte.de/de/themen/behinder-10rechte, the German Institute for Human Rights. ippnw.org/medical-students.html, International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War Students, IPN students. iri-crimes.org/direct_complaints_un.asp, crimes against humanity. ishar.ch, ishar. International Service for Human Rights. iwraw-ap.org, IRA Asia Pacific. International Women's Rights Action Watch, Asia Pacific. jlhr.net, Jordan Labor Human Rights, the Mideast country. eleneta.apc.org. Human Rights Websites 2. law.harvard.edu/program/hrp/guide/rgtoc.html, Human Rights Research Program at Harvard Law School. law.umn.edu/libraries/tools/pathfinders/womenshr2.html, Women's Human Rights Issues. lchr.org, Lawyers Committee for Human Rights. libsex.ac.uk/human_rights/ngos.htm. minorities-at-risk.com, Minorities at Risk. mnadvocates.org, Minnesota Advocates for Human Rights. monitoring-ausschuss.at, Austrian Monitoring Committee. nationalacademies.org/human rights. nclr.org, National Council of La Raza. nff.org, National Forum Foundation. nihrc.org, Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission. okhr.org, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. okhr.org/english/contact/index.htm, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, specific guidelines on how to complete complaint forms. omct.org, World Organization Against Torture. oneworld.net, Human Rights. pdhre.org, the People's Movement for Human Rights. religiousfreedom.org/map.html, religious freedom. Rights worldwide. shr.aaas.org/dhr.htm, human rights resources on the Internet. state.gov/g/drl, U.S. State Department Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. state.gov/g/drl/rls/hrrpt, Human Rights Reports. state.gov/www/global/human-rights/hr peer reports mynhp.html. tue.nl/aegee/hrwg, Associations des États Généraux des Étudiants de l'Europe. umn.edu/humanrts/index.html, Human Rights Library. umn.edu/humanrts/treaties.htm, Human Rights Treaties. umn.edu/humanrts/links/links.htm. umn.edu/humanrtsm, University of Minnesota Library on Human Rights. umn.edu/humanrts/lawform.html. umn.edu/humanrts/about.html, University of Minnesota Human Rights Library. umn.edu/humanrts, the University of Minnesota Human Rights Library. umn.edu/humanrts, the Human Rights Library at the University of Minnesota. umn.edu/humanrts, University of Minnesota Human Rights Library. umn.edu/humanrts/bibliography/biblio.htm, the Human Rights Library at the University of Minnesota. umn.edu/humanrts/inster.ee/nstls2.htm, Human Rights Documents. umn.edu/humanrts/treaties.htm, Human Rights Treaties and Other Instruments. un.org/department/dhl/resguide/spechr.htm, United Nations Human Rights Research Guide. un.org/overview/rights.html, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. un.org/en/documents/udhr/index.shtml, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. un.org/en/documents/charter/index.shtml, United Nations Charter. unstock.unesco.org. unhchr.ch. unhchr.ch, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. unhcr.ch/html/menu3/b/a_ccpr.htm, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. unhcr.ch, Human Rights Committees at the UN. uni-werzburg.de/law, International Constitutional Law Site. unrwa.org, United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA. uottawa.ca/hrrec, Human Rights Research and Education Center, University of Ottawa. uscampaignforburma.org. usis.usmb.se/human/index.htm, International Human Rights Practices, publication of the U.S. Department of State. web.amnesty.org/ai.nsf/countries/USA, Amnesty International Publications. web.amnesty.org/library/eng-index, document library, including country reports. webcom.com/hrin/welcome.html, Human Rights Interactive Network. webcom.com/hrin/parker.html, Association of Humanitarian Lawyers. webcom.com/hrin/research.html, Human Rights Interactive Network. worldpolicy.org/projects/global rights. umn.edu/humanrts, University of Minnesota Human Rights Library. worldsindihi.org, World Sindh Institute. The World Sindhi Institute for Human Rights in Sindh, Pakistan, based in Washington, D.C. xs4all.nl/tank/english.htm, Solidarity Group Political Prisoners. yale.edu/lawweb/avalon/avalon.htm, Avalon Human Rights Project at Yale Law School. youthforhumanrights.org. Human rights websites from web.archive.org/web/2007052414153/http/www.criminology.fsu.edu/p/cjlworld.php state.gov/g/dr/hr, Department of State Human Rights Resources. un.org/department/s/dhl/resguide/spec-hr.htm, UN. Special topics: Human rights. Amnesty.org, Amnesty International. Witness.org, Witness, video cameras to document abuses. Victimology.nl, International. Victimology website. Peacebrigades.org, Peace Brigades. International. echar.coe.int, European Court of Human Rights. humanrights.coe.int, European Commission of Human Rights. aircweb.org, European Human Rights Centre. nottingham.ac.uk/law/hrlc.htm, Human Rights Law Centre at U of Nottingham. wcl.american.edu/pub/humright/digest, Center for Human Rights and Humanitarian Law. schr.org, Southern Center for Human Rights. law.uc.edu/Diana, Diana Human Rights Database. law-lib.utoronto.ca/Diana, Women's Human Rights Database Group. cc.columbia.edu/cu/libraries/individuals/lehman/guides/human.html, Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs. hrw.org, Human Rights Watch. hri.ca, Human Rights Internet, HRI. umn.edu/humanrts/bibliography/biblio.htm, International. Human Rights Law Bibliography. mnadvocates.org, Minnesota. Advocates for Human Rights. www.umn.edu/humanrts, University of Minnesota Human Rights Library. un.org/ISD, International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. ictr.org, International Criminal Tribunal of Rwanda. people.memphis.edu/genocide, genocide. Resources for teaching and research. ess.uwe.ac.uk/genocide.htm, genocide. Documentation Center. yale.edu/cgp, the Cambodian Genocide Program. cco.caltech.edu/Bosnia/criminals/criminals.html, Major War Criminals/Suspects. unesco.org. nigelperry.com/diary, a personal diary of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, 1989-present. cnn.com/specials/1998/n Ireland/timeline, Northern Ireland's path to peace. nio.gov.uk/agreement.htm, Northern Ireland Agreement. airc.org, European Roma Rights Centre. derechos.org/aprode, Asociación Pro Derechos Humanos Peruvian Human Rights Organization. garnet.cns.fsu.edu/SSS4407, Forensic Anthropology and Human Rights. oneworld.net, One World. igc.org/igc, Institute for Global Communications. wolf.its.ils2.edu/injustice/index.html, Injustice Studies. westga.edu/jfuller/peace.html, peacemaking and crime. ll.georgetown.edu/intl/wars.html, war, peace, and security. civilrights.org, Leadership Conference on Civil Rights. Search for commonground.org, search for common ground. e-democracy.org/do comma democracies. Online. ifex.org, International Freedom of Expression Exchange Alert Service. Human rights websites at web.archive.org/201611066/http/andromeda.rutgers.edu/hookjalen/wcj/links/international.html. Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism. California State University, San Bernardino. hatemonitor.csusb.edu/index_old.html. Association for the Prevention of Torture. apt.ch. Amnesty International. Amnesty.org. Coalition All for Fair Trials. all4fairtrials.mk/en/1misija.htm. Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. humanrightsinitiative.org/default.htm. Country Reports on Human Rights Practices, U.S. State Department. state.gov/g/drl/rls/hrrpt. Diana, an international human rights database. yale.edu/lawweb/avalon/diana/index.html. Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights. hfhrpal.waw.pl/en/index.html. Human Rights Around the World. derechos.org/human-rights/world.html. Human Rights Internet. hri.ca. Human Rights Research and Education Center. cdp-hrc.uottawa.ca/eng/index.php. Human Rights Watch. hrw.org. International Center on Human Rights and Drug Policy. humanrightsandrugs.org. International Federation for Human Rights, FIDH. fidh.org. International Helsinki Federation for Human Rights. ihf-hr.org/welcome.php. Moratorium. santigidio.org/en/pdm/pdm_eng.htm. The Death Penalty Worldwide. Police and Human Rights Program, Council of Europe. coe.in/t/e/human_rights/police. Raoul Wallenberg Institute. rwi.lu.se/index.shtml. United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. okchar.org/en/pages/welcomepage.aspx. World Organization Against Torture, OMCT. omct.org/index.php?lang=eng. Chapter 2. Canadian Human Rights Websites. Canadian Human Rights Websites. chrc.ca, chrc-ccdp.ca, 888-643-3304, Canadian Human Rights Commission. chrc.ccdp.ca, Canadian Human Rights Commission. or c.on.ca/en/resources/links, Ontario. chrc-ccdp.ca, the Canadian Human Rights Commission. nwhumanrights.ca, NW Territories. hri.ca, Human Rights Internet. hrsdc.gc.ca/en/lp/ohs/publications/overview.html, Canada Labour Code. uottawa.ca/hrrec, Human Rights Research and Education Centre, University of Ottawa. insight.mcmaster.ca/org/f/pages/law/charter/charter.head.html, Canadian Charter on Rights and Freedoms. ccela.org, Canadian Civil Liberties Association. HRI.ca, Human Rights Internet. uottawa.ca/hrrec, Human Rights Research and Education Centre, University of Ottawa. hrsdc.gc.ca/en/lp/ohs/overview.html, Canada Labour Code. Canadian Human Rights Commission. Canadian Human Rights Commission. 344 Slater Street, 8th FL, Ottawa, on K1A1E1. 613-995-1151. 888-214-1090. CHRC-CCDP.ca. 800-999-6899. Administers the Canadian Human Rights Act and the Employment Equity Act. Provincial Human Rights Offices. Alberta Human Rights and Citizenship Commission. Standard Life Centre. 1600-10405 Jasper Avenue, Edmonton, Alberta T5J4R7. 403-427-3116. 403-495-4040. 403-427-1597, TDD. Fax, 403-422-3563. British Columbia Human Rights Commission. 2nd floor. 844 Courtney Street, Victoria, British Columbia V8V1X4. 250-387-3710. 800-663-0876. 250-953-4911, TDD. Fax, 250-387-3643. British Columbia Human Rights Commission. 306-815 Hornby Street, Vancouver, British Columbia V6Z2E6. 604-660-6811. 604-666-2251. 800-663-0876. 604-660-2252, TDD. Fax, 604-660-0195. Manitoba Human Rights Commission. 301-259 Portage Avenue, Winnipeg, Manitoba R3B2A9. 204-945-3007. 204-983-2189. 800-282-8069. 204-945-3442, TDD. Fax, 204-945-1292. New Brunswick Human Rights Commission. 751 Brunswick Street, Box 6000. Fredericton, New Brunswick E3B5H1. 800-565-1752. 506-453-2301. 506-453-2911, TDD. Fax, 506-453-2653. Newfoundland Human Rights Commission. POB 8700. St. John's, NFA 1B4J6. 709-729-2709. 800-563-5808. Fax, 709-729-0790. Northwest Territories. Canadian Human Rights Commission Edmonton. 403-495-4040. Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission. Lord Nelson Arcade, 7th floor. 5675 Spring Garden Road, Box 2221. Halifax, Nova Scotia B3J3C4. 800-565-1752. 877-269-7699. 902-426-8380. 902-424-4111. 902-424-3999. 3139, TDD. Fax, 902-424-0596. gov.ns.ca/human rights. Ontario Human Rights Commission. 180 Dundas Street West. 8th floor. Toronto, Ontario M7A2R9. 416-314-4500. 416-973-5527, Toronto. 613-996-5211, Ottawa. 800-387-9080. 416-314-4535, TDD. Fax, 416-314-4533. PE1 Human Rights Commission. 3 Queen Street. Box 2000. Charlottetown, Pay CIA 7 and 8. 902-368-4180. 800-237-5031. Fax, 902-368-4236. Commission des droits de la personne. Et des droits de la jeunesse du Québec. 360, Rue St. Jacques. Montreal, Québec H2Y1P5. 514-873-5146. 514-283-5218. 800-361-6477. Fax, 514-873-6032. Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission. 122, 3rd Avenue North, 8th floor. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan S7K2H6. 306-933-5952. 800-667-9249. 306-373-2119, TDD. Fax, 306-933-7863. Yukon Human Rights Commission. 205 Rogers Street. Whitehorse, Yukon Territory Y1ALXI. 867-667-6226. 800-661-0535. Fax, 867-667-2662. Chapter 3. Human Rights in Some Countries. Australia Human Rights Websites. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders Social Justice. hrec.gov.au/social_justice/index.html. UK Human Rights Websites. Committee on the Administration of Justice, Northern Ireland. cha.org.uk. Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission. nihrc.org.